From Church Militant Studios, this is the Church Militant Evening News.
Hello and thank you for joining us this Thursday, March 30th. I am Hunter Bradford, along with James Fedua, here with Catholic News and Context. A news update before we get started, though. A handful of pro-lifers in Michigan are now facing time in county jail. Earlier today, Father Fidelis Mashinsky, Dr. Monica Miller, and 4 other pro-life advocates faced a sentencing hearing for engaging in a Red Rose rescue at a Michigan abortion mill last year. Of the 6 defendants, 4 were sentenced to jail, including Dr. Miller and Father Fidelis, while the remaining 2 got probation. Stay tuned with us as we unpack more of this story in the near future. But tonight, Theodore McCarrick isn't in active ministry anymore, but his allies sure are. After the COVID-19 lockdowns, morale isn't the only thing that's down. And if you're wondering about the health status of Pope Francis, we'll give you an update.
But leading us off tonight, a new report is exposing dozens of priests accused of child sex abuse in the Peach State. The Prosecuting Attorneys Council of Georgia recently issued a report dated March 20th, revealing 28 priests have faced abuse allegations in the state's 2 dioceses since 1940. The council wrote, the report contains detailed descriptions of allegations of sexual abuse and other sexual misconduct, including grooming and misuse of authority. Cardinal Wilton Gregory of D.C., a friend of homo predator Theodore McCarrick, was formerly the Archbishop of Atlanta, during which time he allegedly engaged in abuse cover-up.
A state bill allowing what's called a look-back window for victims of childhood sex abuse, including abuse by Catholic priests, is moving forward. Yesterday, Maryland's House Judiciary Committee voted to advance the Child Victims Act, which would allow sex abuse survivors to sue their abusers in places of employment. House Bill 1 now goes to the Maryland House of Delegates, as a similar bill is working its way through the state Senate. Maryland's Democrat Governor Wes Moore is expected to sign the bill if it makes it to his desk.
And a founding member of the Vatican's Council on Clerical Sex Abuse has quit, publicly airing his frustrations with Rome. On Wednesday, Jesuit priest Father Hans Zollner announced his resignation from the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors. Zollner published his resignation letter on Twitter, saying he was worried about the Commission's approach to safeguarding, quote, particularly in the areas of responsibility, compliance, accountability, and transparency. The 56-year-old German cleric remarked, in my work with the Commission, I have noticed issues that need to be urgently addressed and which have made it impossible for me to continue. Boston's Cardinal Sean O'Malley has come out against Zollner, saying, quote, I am surprised, disappointed, and strongly disagree with Zollner's publicly issued assertions challenging the Commission's effectiveness.
Here on the show to divulge what he knows about Father Zollner's resignation is our Rome correspondent, Dr. Jules Gomez. Jules, good to see you. One thing, though, I'm noticing 2 different official reports on why Zollner quit. Which one's true, or do both contain some elements of truth?
Well, it's rather, unusual, isn't it, when a cardinal who's heading this commission puts out a note saying that Zollner has resigned because he has no time and he's busy with a lot of other things. And then 3 hours later, Zollner himself puts out a very blunt statement. I mean, this is unusually candid for a Vatican official, or at least one acting on behalf of a Vatican commission. And then saying Zollner is resigning because, he's very unhappy with the way things are going, and particularly with the Curia's attempts to frustrate what the Papal Commission on Child Abuse is seeking to achieve.
Is Zollner the first to resign from the commission? I mean, has there been drama with this group before?
Well, drama is indeed the word, Hunter. In 2017, an Englishman who was a victim of sex abuse himself, Peter Saunders, resigned. Rather, he resigned earlier, but in 2017, he was caught in an Italian restaurant in Manchester, England, having sex with an underage girl in the lavatory cubicle. Now, this gentleman is supposed to be a practicing Catholic. And then we had the very dramatic resignation of an Irish woman, Marie Collins. And she openly came out and said she was very, very frustrated with attempts to impede everything that they were doing. And Miss Collins herself was abused by a Catholic priest when she was 13 years old. So these two people know a thing or two about sex abuse, and, they're stepping down, and now ZOLLNER'S stepping down is something quite significant.
Yeah, I was reading some articles online. People regard ZOLLNER as the Vatican's expert on clergy sex abuse, and now the expert just resigned. So interesting story we have here. Jules, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Hunter.
God bless.
All right, thank you, Jules. The Vatican is reporting that Pope Francis's health is improving after being hospitalized yesterday, reportedly with pulmonary problems. The Holy See Press Office issued a statement earlier today on the pontiff's condition, reporting His Holiness Pope Francis rested well overnight. The clinical picture is progressively improving, and he is continuing his planned treatment. The Vatican notes greetings and wishes for the Pope's speedy recovery are pouring in from around the world.
In this week's episode of Strickland Speaks, Terry Barber of Virgin Most Powerful Radio and Bishop Strickland invited Father William Wagner from the Opus Angelorum to talk about angels. Father Wagner is an expert on angels and how they help us to turn from sin and run to Christ.
Christ is the source of the angelic grace, and therefore the ministerial power of the angel is a Christ's influence acting in and through the angels. He has a great formula. He says, as God is the creator of all being, Jesus, according to his humanity, is the source of all grace.
If you want to learn more about the angels, go to opusangelorum.org. Again, that's opusangelorum.org.
And staying with Bishop Strickland, the faith-filled prelate is offering some much-needed clarity with regard to the German bishops. In a recent post on his website, Strickland recalled his own ordination, writing, "It was at this point that the deeper meaning of the phrase deposit of faith came alive for me." He continued, "Yet sadly there are increasing efforts among some to deny the very existence of such a deposit of faith, and even by some in ordained ministry to change the unchangeable. Perhaps the most blatant and obvious example of this error recently occurred in Germany." Earlier this month, at the final meeting of the German Synodal Way, German clergy voted in favor of blessing same-sex unions, lay celebrants, and rethinking priestly celibacy.
A conservative Catholic doctor is criticizing the Church's response to the pandemic. Dr. Aaron Kheriaty, director of the Bioethics and American Democracy program at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, recently spoke about COVID on the podcast A Biblical Frame.
In my own Catholic tradition, I would argue that administering the sacraments, particularly to the sick and the dying, is one of those non-negotiables. That the Catholic Church failed in not demanding access to the sick and dying in the hospital during the pandemic.
He's not alone in that opinion. Dr. Kheriaty noted that if the Church does not admit the possibility of civil disobedience in regards to non-negotiable practices, it has lost its mission. Years ago, bishops shut the doors on Catholics all across America during COVID, blocking the faithful's access to Mass and the sacraments.
Yes, and in related news, new data shows Americans are attending religious services less than they did before the pandemic. The Pew Research Center just released a report of religious observance revealing that many have ceased worshiping at in-person services. While the number of Americans participating either remotely or in person has only dropped a small percentage, staying at around 40%, the type of participation has changed. Of those still attending services, less than half still exclusively attend in person, while a majority either participate entirely online or a mixture of both. But when we come back, as the woke mob screams acceptance, the mentally ill become increasingly violent. And according to one professor, heckling and harassment isn't enough for conservative judges. Stay tuned, all that and more up next.
Thank you for watching the first half of Church Militant Evening News.
If you would like to watch the rest of today's episode, please click the link in the description, and we'll see you at churchmilitant.com. God love you.